Well, I think that you can make a distinction, and almost logically, or if you think about it long enough, you kind of have to make a distinction. Occupy Wall Street, those are the people who are the occupiers. They physically went down there, they slept outside, some got pepper sprayed, they went to the General Assemblies, they did the mic checks, you know, they did the hand signs, they did all that sort of stuff. And, you know, you do the math, it's probably 250,000 people across the country, which is, you know, frankly, that's a significant number of people. But if you look at the polling data in terms of the themes they articulated, it's about a third of the country agreed with them. That's 100 million people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 100 million people didn't go down and get pepper spray. I mean, like that's clearly another grouping of people, not 99% literally, but in terms of who agrees, about a third of the country. Well, 100 million people, that's kind of like the civil rights movement in terms of those large numbers. Everybody wasn't going down there protesting, but a lot of people felt that they wanted to see some changes happen in America. So I say SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the young protesters are like the occupiers, but the 99% movement is much bigger, much like the civil rights movement. You could be in the civil rights movement but not be in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. You could be in the civil rights movement and not be in Dr. King's organization, and not be in the NAACP. It was a much bigger movement than any one organization. And so I make the case in the book that it might be smart for us to think about the 99% movement as being much bigger than just the small number of very important dedicated occupiers.
Well, let's get to what your group is doing.
Okay.
So you want to try to turn this into the 99% into a political operation, even from the local level on up.
Yes.
How are you going to do that?
Well, it's funny. It's already well underway,
okay,
which is exciting. RebuildTheDream.com is one organization in a broad coalition of organizations.
And who, just so we know.
Sure. The present incarnation is called 99% Spring, and it includes AFL-CIO, MoveOn.org, SEIU, the New Bottom Line organization, which is a bunch of low-income groups, people of color groups that have been challenging the banks, the Domestic Workers Alliance, a lot of progressive organizations. And the idea is to begin organizing people to be able to take nonviolent direct action, to be able to peacefully protest, but also to know what's wrong with our economy and how it could be made better, how we could go back to the things that worked for us in the last century. You know, that would, so that is a process that we're a part of. Now, there are some organizations that we've been working with, like Progressive Majority, like the Campaign for America's Future, and others, like the Working Families Party, that are recruiting candidates to run for office. And we've been able to successfully recruit thousands of candidates at the local level, and to be able to support them all the way up to the congressional level. So
now, what kind of positions are we looking at? When you say local level, is it sheriff? Is it?
City council, school board.
Okay.
Sometimes I say from dog catcher to Congress, but I don't know if anybody's actually running it from dog catcher, but it sounds good.
Right.
The great thing about that is that it lets people get involved, and we have this. RebuildTheDream.com has something called the Contract for the American Dream, and we interacted with 131,000 people, 131,219 people to be exact.
Okay. Don't leave anyone out.
All across the country to come up with some good ideas to get America working again. You know, we think if you put the country back to work, you can pull the country back together. And so the Contract for the American Dream has 10 key ideas, including fair taxes, green jobs, save Medicare, and that becomes one of the bases by which people who agree that we could go in a different direction can find each other, interact. Again, 300,000 people signed on to it, but 131,000 people helped to write it. So there's a lot going on, and the book tries to capture this social movement, people-powered politics that's going on. I think a lot of books about D.C. Get caught flat-footed because, Hillary's going to be the nominee, Senator Clinton's going to be the nominee, and she would have been a great nominee, but then Obama comes out of nowhere. And then Obama's the president, he can do whatever he wants to, well then the Tea Party comes out of nowhere.
Right.
Well, the Tea Party means we're going to have austerity forever, then Occupy Wall Street comes out of nowhere. The people, we the people, are impacting the system. And it's not a left-wing period, it's not a right-wing period, it's a turbulent period of change, and we don't know what the outcomes are going to be. but we do know that people-powered movements are going to continue to have an impact. And the book is about that, and rebuildthedream.com is about that.
Are you trying to lay the foundation for a third party?
I think, well, I'm not. I mean, I think that the Tea Party has it right. They're not a third party. I mean, when they say Tea Party, they don't even mean political party. They really mean like the Tea Party of old. But they're inside and outside the Republican Party. So they can function independently when they want to, but they also can be inside the fold when they want to. Progressives have nothing like that. If you're a strong progressive liberal Democrat like myself, we don't have that equivalent. You know, you're either in the Democratic Party or you're not. And so I do think that we need a strong, organized left wing of the Democratic Party in the same way that the Republicans have a strong, organized right wing represented by the Tea Party. And I think if we had a little bit more balance, some people say, well, there's too much partisanship already. And I say, no, there's too much excessive right-wing partisanship. I've seen too little partisanship on the part of Democrats. We keep chasing the bunny down the road, and we've abandoned our principles on too many things for too little too little gain. And so I think we need some of us to go ahead and stick up for our principles, loud and proud, happy to have the debate. And then if a deal gets cut, at least it's being cut between two positions that are clear in principle, and not between one position that is unyielding and another one that's available to be moved without any clear benefit.
Is it going to be difficult though to corral all of these people, because they've got a lot of different interests. They have a lot of different. We're not just talking about Occupy Wall Street, but you have the casualty groups that would make good members. You said of this group, and they were millennials, veterans, homeowners, long-term unemployed, and public employees. All of these people are going to have a lot of different interests. How do you corral them into one, and I know you're not trying to put them into one box, but into one mission?
Well, I think that part of it has to do with what we were talking about earlier. How did we build the middle class? Was the middle class, was it a gift from big corporations? Was it the result of just every individual just doing whatever they wanted to, just like their economic liberty above everything else, with no responsibilities to the community or with no respect for America's government? Or was there another formula? Was it the best of the individual doing their very best, but also the best of America's government, where we could all pool our resources and invest in the country and invest in the next generation, plus the best of our business sector? See, I think the American middle class was created. It's the best invention in the world is the American middle class, because the whole world saw it and they started trying to duplicate it. But it wasn't. There's a myth that says government's not the solution, government's the problem, government's always bad. America's government is this horrible thing. America's government can't do anything right. I don't feel that way. America's government has done some very good things. America's government was the way that we built the infrastructure from the interstate to the internet. America's government is the way that we educated generations of Americans who were able to outcompete the world. America's government and all those governments that she shelters, state, local, and tribal, is a good government. And now it's got some bad parts to it, but so is everything else. But you can't disrespect America's government and say America's government has no role and should be starved. Grover Norquist, we want to cut taxes so much that we can shrink America's government to the place you can drown it in a bathtub. That's not a patriotic statement. I don't feel that way about America's government. So I think, you say, how do you corral people? You tell the true story of the American people. The American century, this century everybody celebrates. Unions had a role, the government had a role, the individual had a role, markets had a role. All of these different parts of America had a role. And you can't just take a wrecking ball, paint it red, white, and blue, and say, I believe in individual liberty, therefore I'm going to smash down every other American institution from public education to unions and say that's the right way to rebuild America. I disagree with that. And I think if you put two stories side by side, one that's a true story of what our grandparents did for us. They did well individually, but they also were a nation of neighbors, and they pooled their money through government to build the best country in the world, and they respected America's government. If you put that story against, we hate America's government's always a problem, we don't want to pay any taxes to America's government, I think you can get a lot of people together, and that's what we need to do.
Finally.